Welcome back. A day after schools are fully reopened, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha this morning toured schools in Kiambu and Nyeri counties, expressing optimism on the numbers that have adhered to return to school government plan. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
We can do to slums in Thika, where I was at an excellent primary school, which has close to 1,000 kids. Nearly all of them have reported, and they were still reporting as I left. So the narrative that children were not reporting, that the reporting was at 50% is not correct. We are closer to 90% plus. In terms of new admissions at Kiandutu, as at the time I was leaving, they had admitted 63 children, mainly from the slum private schools and other private schools within the Thika metropole. I'm now here. This is, what is the name? Gidwariga Primary. I am told it is in a slum. And you also have more than 500 students. But first of all, I want to thank the people of Nyeri because they have done well. The leadership in Nyeri, right from the RC, and the Regional Director of Education, and the County Commissioner in Nyeri in particular, and the education person in Nyeri. With regards to the desk delivery program, I have not had any opportunity and reason to come here again after I was here several months ago, because they are among the very top 10 counties that are doing extremely well, move towards 100, and I think that's what we want to do. I chose to come here today because I'm going to visit some schools in slums across the nation. This is actually the third one, and I'm very impressed that the acreage here is good enough. There are enough trees, although I will still tell them to plant a few more trees. When you walk around the school, you find that there are enough empty spaces. Some are, it's like they were preparing for Corona because the trees are there all the time. So the only thing you have to worry about is rain. Like today's weather is very good. The decision will have to be the head teachers, when to be innovative as to take some classes outside. It will help us to give the children more oxygen and also to deal with social distancing. I think water is not the problem here. I've washed my hands. I'm also glad to see that we are using bar soap, which is cheaper and more effective. My temperature was taken. I've been to the classrooms. All children are masked. As I had said, as government policy, politics aside, we are going to mask all the children in the slums. And then we shall mask children in very large schools, and there are not very many. There are about 20 of them.
In-class learning for all schools in the country resumed yesterday, 10 months after the closure occasioned by the coronavirus pandemic. Numerous challenges and concerns have risen following the reopening. Let's speak now to education commentator Janet Ouko from our City Center studios to discuss some of these issues and the possible solutions. Janet, many thanks for your time here on News Desk. So the Education CS, first of all, has been calling out to media houses and the stakeholders to be positive in this resumption of in-class learning. So let's begin with what positive aspects of this resumption of in-class learning have you witnessed since yesterday?
Thank you so much for having me here. And let me say that I also want to congratulate the Ministry of Education and the government at large for the kind of facilitation we have seen, and even seeing the collaboration that is existing between the local administration and the administration at the education level. Because clearly the responsibility to educate the masses and to drive out children from every corner to respond to the call to government to open schools in the Basic Education Act, that responsibility also does not leave out the area chiefs. And therefore, I think it's positive listening to the Cabinet Secretary talking about a turnout of beyond 90%. I think it is very encouraging. And also to assure the parents really that this is the right thing to do. We cannot keep the children in the houses forever. Corona will be with us for longer. The best place and the safest place we have seen, and even we have witnessed, because as at yesterday, we had very disturbing data about the number of girls that are now expectant, and we pray that they get an opportunity of going back to school. In Kisii alone, you're talking about 4,000 plus. So I think the corona pandemic has reinforced the place of school as the space, as the safest space for children. And so the best we can do is ensure that all children go back to school, and also at community level, try as much as we can to adhere to the Ministry of Health guidelines, so that we make sure that children do not come from school to a contaminated society.
All right, so we had the Education CS yesterday mentioned that the government will disburse about 14 billion shillings for secondary schools, about 4 billion shillings for primary schools, as well as capitation funds to these schools. However, this is the same amount the sector gets anyway, even before the COVID-19 pandemic. And we've had heads of schools now worry that the reopening of schools, not accompanied by additional funding, will ensure, will make these institutions of learning a source of an upsurge of the COVID-19 pandemic. What is your assessment of the preparedness of these institutions to curb COVID-19?
I want to really congratulate the teachers at school level, because a lot has gone on with even without finances. There's a lot of innovation that is happening. You see the jerry cans are being cut into two to provide water sources. But it is really disturbing to see that the government had not disbursed the funding. Up and until yesterday, it still remains a commitment. I am not aware anyway whether the money has hit the schools. And I would want to say that that is the weakest link. But we thank God, really, for the communities that we have, and also for the commitment that the teachers have. And we can only ask government to really play their part, so that teachers do not become discouraged. We know teachers, a lot of them are feeling a little disadvantaged given the data that we are receiving about advanced ages and also underlying conditions, and that can probably affect the teachers more. So we are asking government to really support teachers, because teachers are really going out of their way. I am sure a lot of them are even carrying excess soap, and, to just make sure that the environment is safe. And so we can only call on government that this does not become a commitment, that the schools do not proceed for another 1 or 2 weeks without the resources, because then that is going to be disastrous in schools.
All right, so unlike previous years, it is January, but schools will not be starting a new academic year. Instead, they will be working on recovering the time lost under the tight timelines. There's been many questions about how the curriculum will proceed after this. What does the academic calendar look like as we speak?
No, it is going to be tight. It is really tight. And once again, really the innovation of teachers, and also, the dynamic nature of teachers to want to know how to handle different learners. Because much as we might say that we have 10 weeks and we want to cover all this much, remember that the learners are not the same across board. There are those that would go fast, there are others that would still go slowly, yet you would expect the teachers to be able to carry all the learners across. And that is why I am saying that the strength that we will have, and where we would want to see government investing more, is in supporting teachers to be able to support these learners. Because we might allocate 7 weeks to say that we want to complete this work. But I do not believe that the magic is in the time, but the magic is in how teachers are going to embrace the various approaches to learning, and also urging teachers to go, an extra mile. And I really want to commend government and the Teacher Service Commission, because if there are people who are grateful during this corona period, then they have to be teachers, because we really thank government that their salaries went on, not stopped. And so we are counting on that sort of goodwill to make sure that the teachers are also able to support the learners. It is a difficult time for everyone, and we are expecting that our teachers, as always, will put in their best.
All right, so in the 10 months since COVID-19 was reported in the country, other things other than the pandemic have still been taking place. Private schools, for example, could not bear the storm. Many of them closed down, many of them repurposing their premises for other businesses, some turning into chicken coops, some turning into residential apartments as well. So we have learners that have been displaced from closed private schools, some displaced from schools that have been flooded. What burden does this place on the public institution, public schools in the country?
It is a huge, huge, huge burden that now takes us to the chapter of what we have been talking about, public-private partnerships. I think it is now coming to play every time we have asked government to really appreciate the role of private sector, because truth be said is that the government cannot afford to take every school-going child into the public spaces. And therefore, I am aware there was an arrangement between government and the private institutions to advance them some money. And then there was a lot of noise from people saying that these are private businesses. But I think the verdict is out there that really these might be people's businesses, but they have a huge contribution to make. And especially this time during Corona, when the idea is about decongesting our public spaces. But look at what is happening when private sector closes. Then that brings a lot of congestion to the public spaces. And I am sure our public schools will not be able to cater for all that. I know there are assurances from the Cabinet Secretary for Education that all these spaces are enough, but it is probably because he has to give Kenyans hope that there is an opportunity in the public spaces. But truth be said, I want to give an example of Molem Primary School, for example. That one class has about 120 children. So how many more can such a classroom take? And so it really calls on government to re-examine its policy on public-private partnership in light of everything that is happening, and also in the longer-term strategy of ensuring that these private providers also can be supported by government to support the provision of basic education, especially for the betterment of the quality, because we know there are so many lessons that we can draw from the private providers that when we implement, probably we can both benefit the private and the public providers as well.
All right, and the CS and the Ministry of Health also warned schools against turning learners away for lack of school fees or not being able to complete their school fees, also are urging parents to pay up if possible. Let's talk about how practical and how realistic this is, even for the institutions of learning, especially the private schools.
In practical, it is not possible. And sometimes I do not like the way government turns the heat on the head teachers because the burden is now shifted to the head teacher and the conflict is being facilitated between the head teacher and the parents, so that parents will come in without resources and the head teacher will not be required to turn away. Yet, we know in a boarding institution, for example, a child has to eat, you know, there are services that have to be paid for, so it cannot be free per se. But if government is saying that day secondary schools are free, that we are in total agreement. But for boarding, there has to be an arrangement where the parents facilitate the boarding fees. So what steps are we expecting the government to be taking? One, we are expecting the government to be regulating the amount of fees to be paid in all public boarding schools in the country, so that then we do not have exploitation happening in manner of, oh, we are supposed to be building this, we are painting this, there is motivation and all that. So we are expecting government to be regulating that. And we're also expecting government, because we sat in a task force, I was a member of that task force, and we came up with 53,000 shillings as the amount of money that should be paid in a boarding school, especially at national level and cross-cutting all the way to county level schools. But since 2016, the government has not revised that fee structure upwards. It is not possible that the costs of 2016 are the same costs at 2019. At minimum, we were expecting that government could, per year, adjust that figure to cater for at least the inflationary cost, but that has not been done. And so the heads of schools use that as an excuse, that this fees was agreed on in 2016, but you see the failure of government to just be keen and to follow up its policies so that they are up to date. And I think the other part that government needs to really check is that government cannot be preaching to us about the importance of day schools, yet the same government is watching as every other day school is being converted to boarding schools by teachers and boards of management that are targeting different things. They are targeting the money that government will be giving to boarders. They are targeting more money because we know there is more money when you make a school boarding. But what does that do to the ecosystem? I mean, how many more children are barred from accessing that school? Because the moment it becomes day, you know, it attracts extra costs. We do appreciate that, yes, there are some scenarios where boarding schools are required, but we need government to regulate, because there are some schools that do not meet the threshold of being boarding schools, but have been forced parents are being forced to convert them into boarding schools so that a few heads can continue making a few, some shillings. So I think in terms of being able to manage the policies, we are calling on the Ministry of Education to be very strict and to be, on it, so that seriously on a day-to-day basis, because they are directors who on a daily basis are supposed to be advising government. We should not be dealing with outdated policies. We should not be dealing with policies of 2016, be the policies that we are implementing now in 2021. I think it's a bit unfortunate.
All right. I mean, there's been many questions, especially over the issue of boarding schools and the adherence to COVID-19 protocols, because let's face it, wearing masks is not all that it takes to curb COVID-19. There's the provision of water and sanitation and hand washing points as well. And many have said this then takes us back to the conversation of, are we likely to do away with boarding schools in the country? Is this likely to lead us that way now that we're here?
We have said this time without number, but then again, I think the other weakness we have as a country is that we do not settle down to saying that we are implementing policies over 5 years or over, say, 10-year period of time. We are a little bit haphazard in the manner in which we implement things, because in Africa, we are the most boardingized secondary school sector, if I want to call it that. A lot of our secondary schools, if not all, are boarding schools, and those that are not boarding are disadvantaged because they're just day secondary school that government has not bothered to put a lot of resources in. So anybody will prefer a boarding school anyway because those are the schools that are advanced. So that is the problem we find ourselves in, and the argument against boarding schools has been there, both in terms of cost, both in terms of making sure that you are drawing children away from their parents, notwithstanding the requirement or the need for parental involvement in the education of children or even in their growing up. So there are so many demerits for boarding schools, yet as a country, we have not been advised. We still continue entertaining a lot of boarding schools. And the other thing about boarding schools is that we limit our schools' capacity to bed spaces. So a school will be telling you that, no, we only have 3 more beds available. So telling you that we only have 3 vacancies, which in my view is a little bit defeated, and we need to change that. Think about, there was a move here in Nairobi to make sure that at least a school as big as Alliance, for example, or even any other big school that you want to think about, with so many acres of land, you cannot imagine that that school is only taking 3,000 girls on account of that is the capacity that that school can take. So I think we need to think broader, and we also need to dismantle the cartel thinking within the Ministry of Education, because there's some people who have owned, you own schools, so that when we started the wing for day school in some of the national schools here, a lot of them, it is the principals of those schools that made those day wings collapse. Yet there is one brilliant school called State House Girls. The ministry needs to tell us, why is a day wing in State House Girls succeeding, yet all these others have collapsed? It is because of the attitude of the principal. The principal saw it as a responsibility to expand access to the children of Nairobi, yet others see it as a way of opening up the school to what they call every Tom, Dick and Harrison. But that is not the essence. And I think the Ministry of Education really needs to get advised. The only available advice out there is that we need to first make use of the total capacity that we have, as opposed to starting a brand new Alliance Girls High School. What can we do with all this capacity that we have? And also dismantle this cartel of owning a particular school and make it available and accessible to everybody. How do you argue that a child that worked for 8 years going to Gatina Primary School, for example, today has to sleep inside Alliance Girls if they are admitted to Alliance Girls, for example? Why can't that girl or boy work at home and have the mother not paying any school fees because anyway, their schooling is free? So I think there's a lot of philosophy that we need to re-examine in our education system and how we are running it, and get right on the crossroads and see where we started getting it wrong. Clearly, COVID has come to expose a lot of the non-thinking that has been going on within the education sector.
Janet, many thanks for your time. Janet Ouko, there is an education commentator discussing some of the issues and possible solutions following the resumption of in-class learning in the country since March 2019. Now, students reopened their schools yesterday after 10 months of closure. Some schools in Samburu County, however, have not put in measures to fully comply with the Ministry